A continuación asistiremos a una interesante ponencia impartida por un apasionado de las enfermedades inmunológicas y experto en investigación nutricional. Estoy convencido que les cautivará su entusiasmo, que imprime especialmente en el desempeño de su actividad profesional y que hoy nos lo muestra con la ponencia Respuesta inmune anormal como causa de la enfermedad de Lyme crónica. Les presento a Paul de Saedeleer.
So, thank you for the introduction. Also, thank you for organizing this conference in Madrid. It's a great idea to organize conferences in Madrid, beautiful city. In my eyes, we should have more conferences in Madrid. Okay, good. Today, I have 30 minutes to introduce you or show you some details about immune modulation in treatment of multi-infectious pathology. Now, the basic question to start a lecture is probably why do some patients develop chronic pathology after just one tick bite? And why do other persons like this forester, even with multiple tick bites a day, never evolve to chronicity or even show symptoms? So why are some infections hit and run? And why do we sometimes see this really chronic development in a real pathology? Our immune system is meant to protect us against different kind of threats, pathogens. So basically we should be able to tackle a lot of disorders, even complicated disorders like Lyme. But our immune system is complicated and sometimes it makes mistakes. Now, our immune system consists of two important parts. The first part is the immediate, non-specific response, the innate immune response. It's the first basic root response. And this first part of our immune system then reports to the next part. The next part is the more sophisticated part with a memory, let's say the pathogen-specific part called the adaptive immune response. Okay, so basically, how is our immune system supposed to work? Well, we are at some point aggressed, let's say, by antigens. Antigens are captured by antigen-presenting cells, and the antigen-presenting cells will then scream for help. We need to do something, we need organization. So there is, let's say, some kind of inflammation to further report, to organize and differentiate our T cells. Yeah? And Th1, what we also discussed this morning in previous lectures, Th1 is very important, is the immune part that tackles intracellular infections, but is also capable to tackle extracellular infections. Th2 is limited to extracellular infections, okay? And both are kept in balance by the regulatory T cells. Okay, so, pathogen, first innate immunity, then the report or the communication to adaptive immunity by upregulation of cytokines. And this upregulation of cytokines is organized or is what happens through toll-like receptors in our macrophages. And toll-like receptors are specific pattern recognition receptors, and they will detect or recognize specific parts of the pathogen. And as a result, genes are expressed and inflammation is generated. Now, regarding these toll-like receptors, we have, let's say in humans, we have 10 different toll-like receptors, specific receptors, because Borrelia, for example, is captured or detected by toll-like receptors 1 and 2. LPS, the intestinal endotoxins, are recognized by toll-like receptors 4, and viruses are mainly detected by toll-like receptor 9. So there is a specificity inside the macrophages, inside the sentinel cells to report in our immune system. So basically, it seems pretty easy, let's say. So we are affected by a pathogen, we upregulate systems, innate immunity reports to adaptive immunity, so there is a short generation of inflammation. And after this, well, we switch out the inflammation, we restore systems, and pathogens are eliminated. So it basically seems easy. Now, considering the rapport between innate and adaptive immunity, there is this activation I just explained to you. Sometimes we also see immediate elimination, what is called phagocytosis. And the point or the problem we see in our Lyme patient is that the immune system is actually not doing what we expect. We have an aberrant immune response. That means that the frontal part of our immune system takes control. We generate a chronic inflammation, not a short inflammation, a chronic inflammation causing damage and also causing Th1 and Th2 to shift. So the Th1 response that we need is poor, it's very poor. And we have a dominance of the Th2 response, what is actually a non-efficient immune response in the kind of infections we are dealing with. So Th1, Th2 shift. The Th2 response who is now in charge is not efficient. And we need to say that failure to address these immune abnormalities could be a common cause of treatment failure. Antibiotics and anti-infectious herbs are not capable to fix the Th1, Th2 shift. So we probably need immunomodulators in our complete treatment. So there is a call for immune modulators, and I will show you some possibilities based on research, based on publications. Number one is low-dose naltrexone. Now, naltrexone, the full dose, the 50 milligram, is FDA registered since practically 40 years, the full dose of naltrexone. Now, what is the full dose doing? Well, this full dose of naltrexone is blocking opioid receptors, mainly mu1 and mu2 receptors. There is some activity at the level of delta and kappa receptors, but it's mainly mu1 and mu2 receptors. So blocking opioid receptors means that even if our endorphins would like to bind to the receptors, they would be blocked. Blockage of opioid receptors with the full dose. Okay? And automatically, the approved indications of the full dose are addiction, dependence, or prevention of relapse after detoxification. This is the full dose. Now, what we are discussing today, when we are looking for good immune modulators, is the low dose of naltrexone. And the low dose of naltrexone is basically a dosage between 0.5 and 4.5 milligram. Okay? Now, even the low dose is also blocking the opioid receptors, but only for a very short period. Let's say maximum 4 hours. As a result, we think, whoa, we're running out of endorphins, so we upregulate our own endorphins, and endorphins rebalance Th1, Th2. Okay? So, what are the indications or the possibilities with LDN? Every situation with poor or disbalanced immune response, because the first studies were conducted with patients suffering from HIV, a situation where our immune system is completely collapsed. These were the first studies, but also in autoimmunity. Many studies, publications in MS, Crohn's disease, and so on, Hashimoto even. Okay, so LDN and immunity, we modulate T and B lymphocytes, and we rebalance Th1, Th2. Could be interesting in the perspective that Lyme is the result of an abnormal immune response. So this could be interesting. But we have probably more reasons to consider LDN in our treatments. LDN also lowers inflammation, and basically the inflammatory cytokines that were released by macrophages, microglia. Microglia, you know, the resident immune cells in our brain, but basically they do the same as macrophages. They just protect us against all kind of threats. Now, this is briefly microglial activation, the basis of neuroinflammation. So these microglia are activated, could be infections, could be injury. Often in Lyme, we see an activation by LPS. Remember from this morning, basically in every Lyme patients, we have increased gut permeability and automatically a translocation of the endotoxins of LPS from gut into circulation. So, okay, microglia are activated. As a result, they will produce neurotoxic factors that damage our neurons, okay? Now, what is the activity of LDN in this specific situation? Well, toll-like receptors, remember, toll-like receptors, specific recognition receptors. Well, toll-like receptors 4 are the toll-like receptors that recognize LPS, and now we see that opioids also act on the same toll-like receptor 4, and automatically LDN is a reversible antagonist on the same receptor and automatically downregulates and modulates neuroinflammation. And we know that in many patients, neuroinflammation is one of the basic symptoms next to poor immunity. So basically, 2 reasons to consider LDN. Now, in this specific situation with neuroinflammation, next to LDN, we have more published articles with more options. For example, molecules with an anti-inflammatory capacity. We know, for example, that using non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs decreases the risk to develop Alzheimer's or dementia. And it's this way because non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs just lower microglial activation. So it makes sense in these protocols to consider also other molecules without the gastrointestinal and cardiovascular side effects, but with the availability to cross the blood-brain barrier, like curcumin, quercetin, and artemisinin, and there are probably more of these molecules. Another additional option in neuroinflammation that I like to show is a nasal application containing RG3. And RG3 is one of the active ingredients in Panax ginseng. And many studies show that in this nasal application, and basically in a vehicle that guarantees biodisponibility through the blood-brain barrier, well, RG3 also modulates neuroinflammation, LPS-induced inflammation, but also the neuroinflammation that we see in neurodegenerative conditions like MS, dementia, Parkinsonism, and so on. And of course, last but not least, if we are now discussing about LPS-induced inflammation, of course, basically we need to repair the gut, a good gut protocol with, for example, glutamine and enzymes and maybe even low doses of stomach acid. Okay. Now, the practical application, if you want to use LDN with your patients, it's important to gradually increase the dose. So you start slowly, usually with 1 milligram, and you build up also slowly. The administration is in the evening, based on all the publications between 9 and 10. And also mainly because, especially at the start of the treatment, we regularly see sedation. So in the evening, other side effects, well, are very poor. Don't believe there is liver toxicity. The articles that you will find on PubMed and on the internet refer to high doses, usually of 150 milligram of the full dose naltrexone, and this is of course far larger than what we are using here. So basically it's very safe. It's, for example, also safe during pregnancy. It's also used in children in treatment of autism, for example, so it's safe. And we even see no withdrawal symptoms after the treatment is stopped. Now, regarding the source, it's important to use raw, pure naltrexone to compound LDN. If you start from a 50 milligram tab, crushed into smaller pieces, the additives in the Nalorex 50 milligram are actually often causing more toxicity and neuroinflammation. So it's important to have the raw, pure material. In all my positive comments, I also need to say that it's low cost. It's really not an expensive treatment and easy compliance, only 1 capsule a day, so it's not a big effort. So LDN as a first possibility, immunomodulation, but also the possibilities we see in neuroinflammation. Another option, considering the immunomodulation, considering the fact, whoa, we developed Lyme because our immune system was not capable to tackle, well, another option are the transfer factors. Many publications show the efficiency, but still it's sometimes overlooked. Now, publications clearly say, you know, transfer factors, messenger peptides, transferring cell-mediated immunity, successful as adjuvant or primary choice in different kinds of infections, in immune-related disorders, even autoimmunity, allergies, and so on. Now, what are transfer factors actually doing? They strengthen our Th1. There is an increased activity of natural killer cells, and that's what we need. And they increase the amount of nitric oxide inside the cells for better elimination of the pathogens. Next to the strengthening of Th1, we also see a modulation on Th2. Transfer factors, next to the empowering effect on Th1, also have a specificity comparable with antibodies, but smaller and faster. So usually in our protocols, at least if we know what kind of pathogens we are dealing with, we can also use specific transfer factors to target the pathogens. Publications showing after 1 month natural killer cell activity increased with 250%, and in double dose even with more than 600%. Now, special attention to viral infections. You know, viral infections reactivate. We see many positive Epstein-Barr, CMV, herpes infections. Just like chlamydia and mycoplasma, they are often the pathogens that benefit of the suppressed immunity, but different publications really show remarkable results in viral infections. And this study was conducted with patients suffering from recurrent herpes 1 and herpes 2 infections, genital and labial. And using transfer factors, we see 50% reduction in frequency of outbreaks and, of course, an increased number of T cells. If you compare this with acyclovir, and I'm not saying that acyclovir is useless, absolutely not. I only want to comment on the difference in activity. Well, acyclovir will only shorten the duration of the outbreak, but acyclovir has no effect on the number of T cells. So this could be one of the protocols, and I know many of you already saw this protocol. So basically we combine 2 transfer factors compositions, one to empower Th1 and the other to target specifically the pathogens. Usually in this kind of situations, lysine can be added. Lysine is an antagonist of arginine. Arginine is what viruses need for their replication. So by using lysine, we antagonize arginine, we antagonize the possibility to have this lytic stage. And glutathione also makes sense, not only for liver support, but also for its additional benefits on cellular immunity. Regarding liposomal glutathione, this was published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, showing the benefits of liposomal oral glutathione. As we also heard this morning, Th1 cellular immunity also depends on the level of antioxidants in our cells, so it makes sense that liposomal glutathione is worthwhile. In this study, after 2 weeks, we saw that the concentration of glutathione in red blood cells was increased remarkably with 28%, but also the same study shows the benefits on immune function and oxidative stress. Okay, now, immune modulation probably makes sense. Now, why are things going wrong? Well, we have different possibilities. Age is important. We see how older the patients are higher the risk to evolve to Th2, but of course also genetic modifications, environmental issues are contributing to the Th1, Th2 shift, and stress. And in the, at least if I have 5 more minutes, I would like to show you and explain you why patients who have been or who have suffered from stress from a long period are more vulnerable for Lyme and these kind of infections. Because stress is, for example, this guy who works 16 hours a day, or this lady who gave birth to a baby who is combining her job with baby and with all the other things to do. But stress could also be the overtrained athlete. And if we define stress, I like to refer to the definition of stress in athletes. And well, according to the studies, we know that if athletes are exercising, once they reach a volume that exceeds 60% VO2 max, the level of cortisol in plasma is increased. And if they do this systemically, in a systemic training, well, even at rest, the cortisol level is increased. This is stress, and this is what we see in the athletes, in this guy, and in this lady. Okay. Now, what are the implications? What are the metabolic implications of extended exposure to cortisol? And I'm sure you will see many of your patients that primarily had a lot of stress before they developed the infection. Well, the first implication is imbalanced immune response. And I will show you why, because you know, we have mast cells, a lot of mast cells. Mast cells have receptors for cortisol. They have receptors for corticotropin-releasing hormone. So if we have high levels of cortisol, we damage, we degranulate mast cells releasing histamine and cytokines. This is Th2. So in patients, stress for a long period, Th1 is poor. We have a Th2 dominance, what we also discussed at the start of the lecture, and automatically they are more vulnerable for infections. Other metabolic shifts that you will see in this population next to the vulnerability for infections are, of course, the gut hyperpermeability, what we automatically see in inflammation, in chronic inflammation, but also insomnia. More inflammatory cytokines cause insomnia, and insomnia is causing more inflammatory cytokines. So it's a vicious circle, and it's also affecting the natural killer cells, because natural killer cell activity is really dramatically decreased in poor sleep. But these patients, for example, also suffer from bone problems like stress fractures and more, because cortisol disrupts the acid-base balance. And last but not least, in extended exposure to cortisol in stress, we see a shift from T4 to reverse T3. And with reverse T3, we antagonize the normal activity of T3. And you know T3 is one of our most important metabolic regulators. It regulates the sensitivity of our insulin receptors, of serotonin receptors, but also mitochondrial activity, the way we produce ATP. If we downregulate T3, we lose 40% of our mitochondrial activity because we can't convert the fatty acids in ATP anymore. So these are, I think, just to give you a complete overview of all the metabolic shifts next to the imbalanced immune response in this population of stressed patients. So, of course, in treatment of this population, it's important to also address the deeper cause of the problem. So next to the immunomodulators, of course, they need to rebuild normal rhythm with better balance between work and personal life. Sometimes adaptogens like rhodiola and ashwagandha help to support the HPA axis, and more nutritional corrections like, for example, melatonin, who really resets the HPA axis, so it makes sense next to, for example, magnesium and vitamin C. Okay, so failure to eliminate the pathogens with an efficient immune response largely contributes to the further development of chronic pathology, and immune modulators like, for example, low-dose naltrexone and transfer factors certainly make sense in a successful multi-functional treatment. I thank you for your attention.